Okay. I think there's a couple of people out there. So let's just talk a little bit about the markets as we wait for Jeff. Okay, so hold on one second. I'm just in the background. I've got the news on, so I just want to kind of like fill you guys in. So the FTSE specifically has just started to drift a little bit to the downside. This gap isn't actually there. It's a futures. Oh, hold on, one moment. Just giving me. Why is Jeff? Jeff is just sending me a link for the show, but I'm just. Just talking to him. Further downside is, I'm not going to say expected, but certainly anticipated at this level. You can see that there's a trend line along here that has been broken, and we're just starting to refuse that level. And it looks like we are at this stage. Um, at this stage, looks like a little kind of reversal bar, a shooting star, a high test bar, whichever one you call it. But the market has pushed down from the highs. The daily pivot is a little bit too close to suggest that it would break down without touching that. But what this is telling us is that there are still probably enough enthusiastic sellers in the market to suggest that downside is the best course of action. So going short around about the daily pivot would be a preferred option if that is what you want to do. Breaking down here, yes, it will likely break through this level eventually, but you're going to need to put stops above the daily pivot. So it just depends on, getting in here is not the worst thing in the world. If this bar starts to move to the downside, maybe breaking under this particular level wouldn't be the worst entry in the world, but stops are going to have to be above the daily pivot, which means that you're effectively going to be cutting into your profit line, because that's going to be your first target. It's bounced there a couple of times now, so but because of that, we're probably looking for that area initially, at least, to hold. I'm not sure if it's going to continue to drift lower or whether we start to carve out some sort of bottoming pattern down here. That's what I'd kind of like to see. In geopolitical news, the Iranian situation is the big news of the day. It's the big news of the week. It's the big news of the weekend. Donald Trump calling off airstrikes at the last minute because he didn't think that it was a balanced reaction to shooting down a drone, because they would have
disproportionate.
Disproportionate. That's the word. How you doing there, buddy?
Going all right, mate. You?
Yeah, not too bad at all. So yeah, we saw a little bit of weakness coming into the market on Friday, and I'm just interested to see what's going to happen now, because Donald Trump putting sanctions on Iran is from today as well, is potentially going to stoke the flames, but it's possible that the market doesn't really concern itself too much. It would certainly suggest that there's enough tension out there to curb the upside for right now. And if we look into these charts in a little bit more detail, then let's bring the clean one on for right now. We can't really judge this bar just yet, but certainly for right now, we are seeing some weakness out there, and it would suggest that the sellers are still fairly keen. But how low does it come is going to be the big question, and there will potentially be some bulls in waiting. because they are probably still fairly interested in the possibility of rate cuts from the United States and the possibility of further easing from Europe as well. So I don't really see too much in the way of a turnaround in the trend, but a little bit of easing down would be fantastic. You know, I've been waiting for a bit of easing down for quite some time, and that may lead us down possibly another 80 or so pips would be great. And let's just draw the lower trend line in as well. I mean, that could suggest quite a bit lower, but I'm not sure whether that's going to come into play. Difficult to read this particular version of the FTSE because there are, this particular bar here, and when we look at the weekly bar, we see the same thing. It looks like a pretty negative-looking weekly bar engulfing the spinning top here, but that weekly bar doesn't really look like that because of the expiration of the futures into the new 3-month period. Might be better to look at the cash, and the cash looks completely different. You know, we got a spinning top followed by a spinning top, so more indecision really with the cash than anything else. Breaking down the low of this these two bars, I think, would give us probably a clearer picture, and then we can start to look at the futures just a little bit more keenly. But I will continue to watch the futures because that's the chart that I trade from. So we're looking for a little bit of weakness, potentially a bit of stabilization. There are indications on the 4-hour chart that this market has broken down, and this is the reason why. When we look at this price action here, this was our level of support, and this was our level of support. And both of those two areas have been broken down. The pivot, as I say, will likely play a part and be tested at some point today. But after the pivot is tested, then I would actually be looking for further downside, further weakness. Looks looks like a bit of a head and shoulders pattern, but obviously, as I said, it's a slightly different pattern that we are really trying to ascertain what exists, because as I say, this gap doesn't really exist in the market from selling. It's just a gap from the expiration of the futures rollover into the next one. So we're probably more looking at what looks like, I guess it's a falling wedge. Yeah, but either way, we've broken down a trend line here. So let's see if we can get some further downside. The measured move on a pattern like this is something that takes us probably closer to the potential off area down here. So let's look for downside. I'm not sure whether I want to play it any further. I've already got some shorts in the market. I did play a short on Friday, which obviously worked out really well. I took profit on it at these lows here. Didn't get the full move, and when I look at this now, I would be very, very comfortable sticking with it. I'll be more than happy to stick with it. But what it might mean is that if it pops up, I could get the same potential price. Whether I trade it again, I'm not sure, but we'll see how it goes as the day rolls on. Now, let's check the news and data for the day and see what we have coming up and see what could shape the market. Firstly, we do have the Donald Trump and Iranian issue, which could shape the market. Governor Lowe speaking, and he's spoken, hasn't he, Jeff? What did he say?
Oh, mate, got no idea. I've just opened my charts for the first time since Thursday, so I'm really way behind everything. I don't know what he said.
Okay.
Absolutely no idea. Sorry.
No problem, mate. No problem at all.
And I'm still flat out on another project as we speak, but that's okay.
No worries, mate. Okay. Well, we don't really have too much clarity on Governor Lowe, but that's not a big deal.
What happened to the Aussie? What time was that? That would have been this morning. Oh, the Aussies going like the rest of them, like the clappers.
Oh, is it? Let's have a look.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if we can share a chart here. Now, Aussie, I'm out of all trades now. All my trailing stops have been taken by these reversals or these retracements, and that's all good. We made money on everything, so that's a-okay. But now we see a very, very strong retracement on Aussie, Euro, Pound. Everything seems to be going in the one direction as the the greenback tends to be out of favour, one would say, and somewhat mysteriously to me.
Off, mate. Talking of the greenback being out of favour, have you seen Bitcoin?
No, I haven't, mate.
Off again, 12,000.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it later.
Wow.
But yeah, God, if you wanted a trade for the last 2 months, then Bitcoin was the kiddie. It's been amazing. But yeah, as I say, we'll come to it later on.
Yeah. Okay. Not that would ever have been likely for me, but that's neither here nor there. Bitcoin people have got a real tiger on their tail, on their hands. There, that's the question.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, they are.
Yeah.
It's certainly roaring at the minute. That's for sure.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so the dollar is in the poo-poos, and as I said, oh, Jesus, sorry, mate. This keeps
Alarms.
messages. No, they're messages.
Oh.
I'm going to have to answer this one. Can you give me 30 seconds?
Of course. Of course.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We can have a look at. I was going to look at the Aussie, so let's have a quick look at the Aussie. So, Governor Lowe came out around about 8 or so hours ago, and we do see the Aussie did push to the upside, managing to break through some levels, but it is now at a potential level of resistance here. First level of resistance, I would say that it needs to get through if it is going to continue a genuine move to the upside on the price action. So have to see what happens with the Aussie. Let's just check across the board with the dollar. Dollar continues to move to the downside daily. This is a daily chart, so moving to the downside against the CAD. The dollar Swissy again, 1, 2, 3 days of downside. So huge moves in the dollar, and actually seeing the euro as well picking right up against the dollar as well. So breaking through and going. You know, it's well and truly on his way. And is not looking at this stage like it's going to ease. Now, what we do have, interestingly, is
Look at that. Where was I? What chart's that?
this is the
Monthly.
weekly. That's the weekly. Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful trade. Yeah.
Yeah, so that one's gone there, and the other one is the pound, which is also easing back to the upside as well. I say easing, may well have broken out some
It hasn't
areas.
taken off like the euro or the Aussie, but
Not quite. No. Did the weekly trade that you were in stick?
No, mate, I'm out of that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well,
actually, I'm looking to get back in. So
okay. All right. So we got that. Let's just check the pound across the board. So against the euro, it's stable. And against the Swissy, it'll probably be something quite similar. It's stable. Interested against the yen. Nice pop to the upside against the yen. And this is kind of fascinating because we do have a potential of a Boris Johnson government in tow, and it has to be said that Boris Johnson getting into power would be incredibly bad for the union. There's already he's already stoked the fire in Scotland, where the Scottish National Party have really kind of come out and said how awful it would be for Scotland for a Boris Johnson, for Boris Johnson to become PM. And his rival has come out and said that he would do everything possible to stop the union breaking down. Now, the union breaking down is being triggered right now because of Brexit, so I don't know exactly what that means in the way of that, but right now the pound is rallying, which, as I say, is kind of peculiar. There was a story over the weekend that Boris Johnson had some fracas at his apartment, and there was screams from his partner, and the police were called out. And I'm not sure. It was obviously very, very apt timing, but I'm not sure whether that story hasn't really stuck. He is very Donald Trump-esque in the way that he manages to avoid any negative press and turn them into a positive. So I'm not quite.
isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean him, Donald Trump and him. It's effectively they're just so thick-skinned. It's almost like they don't care. But I find the whole Boris Johnson potential and the story about Boris Johnson very, very dangerous. And I think if you were to look across the country, Well, in fact, I can say with some confidence, with polling across the country, Jeremy Hunt, his rival, is a lot more popular across the country than Boris Johnson. But unfortunately, the country doesn't get to vote on the Conservative leader. It's only the Conservative members, and within the Conservative membership, Boris Johnson wins pretty much hands down. So it looks like a procession at this particular stage. Things can happen. There are twists and turns, but because Boris Johnson's so good at avoiding negativity, it may not matter. It may not make any difference.
They'll throw more mud at him, though, or whoever's throwing mud at him. There's no question about that. So if any sticks, that can change. And,
yes.
And even his peers, the people who actually do vote, if they start to get a sniff that he's less than desirable by the public, then why would they go with him? Why wouldn't they go with Mr. Popular?
That's true. That is true. I mean, the Conservative membership are a very different beast, and the thing is, when it comes down to the voting public, yes, will obviously still represent some Tories, but I think the way the Conservatives will see it is that most of those people that would be voting for the rival would probably be fairly left wing in their attitudes, and I'm. It's funny actually. The older I get, the more kind of left-sided I become. I'm much more of a moderate. I would much prefer to see a centre-left government than anything else. That's my kind of position, I suppose, in political terms. And I've got no real love for Jeremy Corbyn. But when it comes down to an extreme right-wing government, then I'd probably be more likely to go to an extreme left-wing than extreme right-wing. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether that's going to have much sway or not when it comes down to the Tory membership. They may dig their heels in, and he may be able to embolden that particular feeling as well, because that's what he's very, very good at. He's done that with Brexit, and when it comes down to the country, I think the country has been polled to say that they would probably vote to remain now. But when it comes down to the Conservative membership, most of the Conservative membership want to leave. And Boris Johnson is the only candidate who is saying that we must leave on the 31st of October by hook or by crook, whereas his rival is a little bit softer in his tone. And it's just one of those things, the fact that the Conservative membership get to vote on the next leader of the country is a little bit criminal in some respects. The fact that we will all be drawn into something that, or drawn into a person that hasn't been given the rubber stamp by the nation, just seems wrong. And a general election would be probably the better route, but that's not likely to happen. I mean, why would Boris Johnson give up his strong position with the general?
That's right.
It's just there's just no reason for it. So that's where we're at. So yeah, so it surprises me about the pound, but the pound has rallied, or it has stabilised in another regard. As I say, against the euro, it's stable. When we look at the daily chart on the euro pound, then the euro pound, actually looking at the weekly, the euro pound is probably getting fairly close to some potential reversal areas. That's shows a little bit more room to go. But I think if we're starting to look along these levels here, then we're there already. For some of those pound bulls and euro bears to come back into the market, and they're probably just waiting for a reason. Well, of course they're waiting for a reason. Actually, I don't know why I said probably. They're waiting for a reason to short this, because by the charts, the euro is looking a little bit pricey against the pound. But fundamentally, is that the case? And when you think about the Boris Johnson scenario, we're not really sure. On the flip side of that, of course, there's a lot of European elections going on over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. And they are not really in agreement, the European partners. They're not really in agreement on who should be taking the reins next. So that may have some play and some sway in what happens to the euro. And I didn't read into it with too much time and focus, but I did see a little headline about Grexit, which is the Greek exit from the European Union, as well over the weekend. So there's still some disharmony out there, but we've seen this before, and they've managed to. 'Pretty much put out most of the flames of any fires that might burn the European Union. So, yeah, so it's a surprise to me about the pound, but the pound has rallied, or it has stabilised in another regard. And when it comes down to the General Election, we're not really sure. On the flip side of that, of course, there's a lot of European elections going on over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. And they are not really in agreement, the European partners. They're not really in agreement on who should be taking the reins next. So that may have some play and some sway in what happens to the euro. And I didn't read into it with too much time within with Greece or any other nation leaving apart from the UK. So
Look, this is a fascinating cross, euro pound. It really is. I've been waiting to get back into a short here
yeah,
for the longest time now. What, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nearly 2 months now.
we're
Been
back on
waiting
your
to get
chart.
into
So
a
let's
short.
see what you got.
Okay. Let me pinch them. There's a tale of two stories here. If I look at this, the daily chart's telling me this is a sell.
Oh yeah,
Because we've broken this trend line and we've retested it and pulled away from it even.
and that's the right shoulder as well, isn't it, mate? The break of the trend line.
Pretty much. Yep. Absolutely. Left, right. Yep.
Mm.
So that's telling me short. But if I look at the 4-hour chart, it's telling me the reverse, because we've broken this trend line, which is very strong, and we've come back above it and retested it from above. So I'm getting very conflicting messages here between the two time frames.
I mean, when I get
Forward.
that, mate, because I really like that, because what that tells me is that some patience here would be advisable, because if that does end up also shaping up on the 4-hour, we've got a really good position to go short and plenty of time. So it's just waiting for that 4-hour to catch up, isn't it?
Yeah, true story. Where that comes from in this area is probably evident also as this resistance line, and this confluence will kind of shout at us, I would think. Well, I would hope that will shout at us when the time comes. So, as you say, if and best play here would be price up to this line again, and sticking at that resistance level, coming back underneath here, underneath the pivots as well, then giving us a retest. If that were to happen, then I'm a short for sure.
Yeah, and I would suggest unlikely to happen today, but that weekly pivot is going to be there for
That's
the
right.
next 5. So we'll probably be looking at some time this week to look for the short in euro pound. I like that analysis, and I would I'd completely concur with that. And it is just a question: what's going to be the catalyst for that?
Well, great question. I have no idea. Did you had a look at the news all week or just today?
Just today. Let's have a look all week.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. As I say,
There's some
we've got
fascinating things actually out there. I can flip to mine if you like. This is what we got.
yeah, go for it.
So we got on Tuesday. Actually, the market is just opened up. Let's just have a quick look at the FTSE, and then we'll get back to the news. FTSE 100. I'm just looking to see it test the daily pivot and then reject it. So I'm looking to see whether the market will actually be a short. But from this point here, so just looking to see if there's a little bit of rejection here. This is a short for people. So there's 2 ways you can play it. You could just get in here. It's not a bad place to get in on the short at all, and stops above the trend line here. That would be my advice. So you're probably looking at a short right now with a stop around about 15 pips, let's say, above. I think that'd be plenty of room. The other option is that you wait for a breakdown here, but you're not really looking for so much profit. So the daily pivot should act as the first level of resistance, and if it doesn't, then you're looking for this trend line to be a level of resistance. And if that doesn't, then you're probably going to have to give it up. If we just put a quick fib on it, then I can't put it from here. I think I've probably illustrated the reason why enough. Yeah, nice fibs here too. So we got 38% retracement also, which sits around about the daily pivot. So I'm hoping you guys have triggered a short already. Now you always want to go in light. When a market's pushing up, you're not looking to kind of to trade too heavily. So you want to put in kind of the way that I would advise is put in half your lot here, and then add the other half if it does start to break down. So you're already kind of in the money by the time by the time the market breaks down. So you go half in, comes down. When that half is starting to break down at this point, you move the first half at break even, enter your second half here, and then see if it goes. and then at some point you'd be looking for probably a bounce down here, and when it comes back up again and bounces hopefully back down again if the trend is to continue, then you're moving your second half to the top end of that, and that should then be starting to make an aggregate trade free. Now obviously the breaker to the upside is going to be your out, and again your fibs are going to act as a stop area. So just above the 50% area on the fib, I put 3 pips. I wouldn't just do the 2. I put like 3 pips above, maybe even 4 above the 50% line, and that gives you an entry to the downside, and it gives you a nice area to stop and an add point as well. So let's get back to the news. That would be my take on the FTSE 100 this morning. We need to check barometers and everything else. I don't really see too much in the way of further confidence this morning with those potential sanctions coming out. Obviously, there's still the chance that that people sweep that whole scenario and situation aside, and they don't concern themselves too much with the problem in Iran, and then and it could be that we are looking for tomorrow before the market does actually do anything which would account for some further downside. And the reason I say tomorrow is that we got Chair Powell out again tomorrow. So the question at this point: do people buy into that, or do they sell into that? And at this stage, it's certainly a potential sell. But that might start to change throughout the day. So let's see what happens there.
What is that one, mate? Is he testifying, is he?
I think he's just talking about the state of the economy. Now, interestingly, and this is the thing, you see, the market did start to move back to the downside on Friday. And what was really fascinating was that Jerome Powell, a few days before, had effectively said that there was going to be some rate cuts depending on data, and that's the big takeaway. It's depending on data. Mario Draghi said the same thing, rate cuts depending on data, and then towards the end of the week, we started to get this. If I can go back, so this is Thursday's data. Philly Fed, non-par, there's nothing of any huge interest there because it's all yellow. But when we start to come down, flash PMI from Europe, 53.1, a beat of the forecast, but more significantly, a beat of the previous. We got French flash manufacturing PMI, a beat. German flash manufacturing PMI, a beat of both. That's the significant part. So there's growth there. The forecast is one thing, but to beat the previous means that there's just a little bit of growth. Services PMI was also a beat on both, and the flash PMI from Europe, I suppose, maybe interestingly was lower than forecast, but it's still a beat on the previous. And then Europe services flash PMI was a beat. So that was always going to put a bit of pressure on the indices. If they're waiting for data, the data does not say this is the time that they're going to be able to use any of their tools, or why would they use their tools when that data comes out? And then we start to come into the United States, and we see flash PMI, a flash manufacturing PMI from the States, a little bit weaker. But the services PMI also a little bit weaker, and FOMC Brainard speaks as well, but I don't think he said anything that significant. Maybe he did shove the market down a little bit, but these numbers weren't significant enough. They're looking for some genuine softening, and yes, it's getting very close to a contraction here, but it's not probably significant enough. And obviously they're going to wait for a longer period. So the numbers didn't really help when it came down to the potential decisions from the central banks. They weren't really they weren't really helping them out when it came down to looking at weak numbers. And we're going to get into Tuesday and start to see whether these numbers also start to make any kind of difference. So the Fed chair is going to be talking about the state of the economy, the health of the economy. And what's he going to say? I mean, I don't know whether he's going to say that anything that significant. He might just say that there's just a little bit of softening. But is that enough to kind of change his position? I don't know. I mean, when we're looking at the market right now, the market is having a go at pushing back to the upside. So there might be some buying into that particular announcement rather than selling into the announcement. But as I say, to my mind, this is still a selling opportunity rather than a buying opportunity, and there could be some waiting regardless of whether people are confident about what Jerome Powell's going to say, or whether they are a little bit skeptical about what he's going to say. So let's see what gives. The other thing about this is that if this does push forward, it's likely to get trapped somewhere rather than pushing to highs. If we look at the S&P as a kind of barometer for all this, then the S&P, whoops, the S&P is it just showed one bar. I mean, it's only one bar, but it did show one bar of a little bit of weakness. It's the futures are currently attempting to push back to the highs again, but these are significant highs on the S&P. When we look along the monthly, these are all-time highs up here. So the question is, do they need to actually hear something with some genuine meat on the bones before they push it through the highs, or are people confident enough at this stage just to continue buying? And I'm always a little bit suspicious when we get to kind of these areas where we are pushing to all-time highs, because there's going to need to be some follow through, and if there are geopolitical concerns out there, i.e. Iran, then there may well be some people that are quite happy to sell their positions here, because they know that if it does pop up, they'll probably be they're likely to be able to add to them. So it's not really kind of my game to continue to buy into extreme highs. But in saying that, the FTSE 100 is attempting to get up there. So let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens indeed. I've, as always, need to have a look at the major currency pairs. I'll do that now if you like.
Yeah, let's do that, mate. Let's just put these numbers back on for everybody so they can see. It was that one, which is now through that trend line, which is interesting. And there is this fib, which you wouldn't be taken out just yet. Yeah, let's get to the major currency. See what you got.
Yep, all good. Okay, well, it's pretty much the same as we've been saying. The dollar is weak and weakening substantially. And look, I'm a little bit on the Y side of this one because of this interest rate scenario. And it will be interesting to hear what Powell says, because I've got a funny feeling that he's not going to be dovish at all. I'm not going to say he's going to be extremely hawkish either, but I think if we've got to have a great memory for fundamentals, and that's why I struggle with it, because my memory's up to putty. But sometimes it's good. It depends on what it is. I see the last few numbers has not been great. I recall that we had a horrendous jobs number. Was it last jobs number or the one before? I can't remember.
Yeah, the last one wasn't great. Yeah, I think
wasn't great. Wages have been oscillating, between 0.2 and 0.3%. I think 0.2 was the same as previous, on the same day as NFP, as you would expect. But I think before that, the numbers weren't that horrible out of the States. So, again, my memory is not a very, very good gauge of all these things, but that's kind of what I take into this. And then I note that the whole world says, well, sorry, not at the death they didn't, but the whole world says a couple of weeks out from the FOMC statement that the Fed were going to cut interest rates. They didn't. And suddenly we've got a crashing US dollar. Things aren't as they seem to me. And I know this is trade wars. I know that we've got other issues around the world. And Paul B's got an interesting scenario, or an interesting theory on this. And he's saying that the debt crisis that the states are in is knocking on the door. And this is one of the things why I don't believe why the US dollar should be anywhere near its current value. But uh, I've been saying that for probably 5 years as well. So nothing's changed on that front. But it's interesting that Paul is now suggesting that the Wolves are going to come knocking on the door. And that will have a major effect if they do. And how that plays out, I've got no idea, to be fair. But to my mind, if you just keep increasing your debt year in, year out, week in, week out, as they tend to do, nothing phases them. It's all right. We need to build a wall. Let's do it. Well, according to Donald, anyway. We need to have a war. Let's do that. We need to do this. All sorts of different things. And the infrastructure spending since Trump came to office has been, I won't say unprecedented, but it certainly escalated big time. And that's probably why we're seeing the great numbers come out of the economy in the US. But is it sustainable and is it affordable are the questions that need to be asked. And eventually the answers will be, well, no, we really couldn't afford to do that, in my opinion. And I'm no economist, but to me, I just exercise logic and common sense to these things. And at my age, when I look on a domestic level, the good debt you carry throughout your life is good only if the economy is raging and inflation's great and all the rest of these things. If they're not, then assets can depreciate very quickly as well. So I'm stuck at the moment, just like I suppose I was describing on euro pound. I'm stuck between two places. I see an interest rate cut that wasn't an interest rate cut, exactly the same as happened on the Aussie the month before. And the Aussie fell as well, but since corrected itself. So if you can see where I'm going with this, I'm really not a fan of a sinking US dollar in this medium or intermediate term. Short term, I don't get it at all. Well, I do get it because of the fundamentals around external US forces, if you like. But I'm medium term thinking the dollar will rally again. Long term thinking the dollar will crash to billio, but that's a long way from here, I believe. Unlike what Paul was thinking, it's imminent, and that's probably why he's very much bearish on the US dollar. And I know he's got a lot of mates, and once again, I seem to be on the reverse side of that, which suits me. I'm quite happy with that. But yeah, that's where I'm at, mate. I'm really a long term US dollar bear, but at the moment, I think it's going to provide some buying opportunity shortly.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're probably right, mate, as well. And I think it's interesting that we get two central banks really sort of saying the same thing. When it comes down to the ECB and the Fed, they mirrored each other. In many respects, that they both said the same thing, and yet it affected the euro positively and it affected the dollar negatively. It's quite peculiar, really. I suppose that because the dollar's the big gun, and with the euro at significant areas, significant buying areas, then that's obviously got a bearing on that. But I do find that quite fascinating that you've effectively got no difference between the two of them. Why is the euro going to be a buying opportunity if it weaken, if they add stimulus? It doesn't really kind of figure in many respects. But I'd like to see some.
I guess Julie's been telling us for weeks now that he calls it the commercials, and there's such a thing as the commercials, and that really means that the weight of money is balanced on the euro at the moment, and that was looking very much the picture for a couple of weeks now, and Julian's been promoting that, saying that as soon as the euro does bounce, it's on its way to 118. And you know, looking at the chart right now, it's broken through major resistance. One would tend to suggest that that may not be a forlorn prospect. So at the end of the day, if you look at, I guess, the weekly chart, you can see that, well, it depends on which trend line you draw, but as far as I'm concerned, we're still in a downtrend, and that may be over. Well, maybe we're not. Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at last week's weekly chart, maybe I should go there. You want to look at my chart?
Yeah, let's have a look, mate. Yeah,
where you are. Yeah. As I said, I haven't had really a lot of time to analyse this so far this week, having opened my charts just now. But if you have a look at the weekly chart, you know, there's a trend line. This is coming through here, and there's a trend line coming through here as well. And it looks, for all intents and purposes, as though that's gone, this level here. There's a strong horizontal level at there, which tends to suggest that 116 is just around the corner. In fact, maybe even by the end of the week, we could be looking there. That's 220 pips away from now. Maybe that's worth a look. And if it gets through there, then yeah, 118 is not too far away. So I can totally see where he's coming from. He would have used a measured move on whatever he was looking at. But yeah, that looks to be very strong right now. I mean, those two bars right there are the strongest bars that I can actually find on the chart since we're here 2 years ago. So that's quite interesting. Okay. So maybe we need to turn into Euro bulls, pound, well, just dollar bears, basically, because everything's going. It's pretty much a polar thing. You're either short the dollar or you're in trouble.
Yeah.
At the moment, by the looks of things.
Yeah, it certainly does, doesn't it?
As I said, I think that can turn around, even if only on a short-term basis. I don't expect that these things will just continue going up without some sort of retracement. And I'll probably be looking to trade retracements this week. We'll look at it.
It's fascinating, isn't it, mate? Because you know, I agree with that, and also when it comes down to the way that it's gone, because it's so aggressive, I get very, very, very nervy. And unless you get in at the bottom or near the bottom, when you see an aggressive move, as we've had in these markets, it always concerns me that we're going to get an aggressive move in the opposite direction, because when markets kind of step up gently, they tend to step down gently. But when they explode in one direction, they tend to do the same in the opposite direction. You know, there does seem to be a bit of yin and yang when it comes down to the markets. It doesn't. It's not just kind of you know, something that that will go and go and go, as you say. It's and that's where you have to be very, very careful where you enter. If you're going to enter any of these, you've got to make sure that you enter when you get a decent setup, but I suppose more significantly a decent price. Because you know, this stuff can really kind of tear you up if you're wrong, and if you miss it, you just got to miss it. You just got to let it go, because there's always another opportunity around the corner. It's interesting with the FTSE. The FTSE has now broken through that 50% fib. Very, very aggressive. This move to the upside has been hugely aggressive for an opening, really 15-minute play, and it's just a bit concerning. I suppose, you know, we're really looking at the first hour. Let's see what happens on the first hour of trade. But if we start to see this weekly pivot, maybe the weekly pivot may start to act as a level of resistance, but just a bit of a lack of volatility. And also, I've got the barometers here set up as well, and the barometers really from the opening block have opened with the market up 70%, 71% in positive territory. So at this particular stage, there's no appetite for the downside. So you're really looking at this stage to try and buy into this, but you've got to be very careful, not just to buy and sometimes I think if you trade the first minute, that's different. But when the first kind of 15 has happened, then you've got to make sure that you wait for the next opportunity. And I'd still, and the other thing is my stance doesn't change on direction at this stage. The first 15 minutes doesn't, it tells us a lot, but it doesn't tell us everything. It's only a 15-minute bar. I'm really interested to see what happens with this bar by the top of the hour, and see if it has actually pushed down below this area. Yes, anybody entering here and having stops at that point, you're already out, but you should be out on a reduced amount because you shouldn't have been going in full blaze anyway. But then you're kind of looking for another opportunity, and at this stage you may flip positions and start looking at a long. But by the top of the hour, it's probably going to give you a much cleaner and better picture to know what you're going to do for the day. But because, as I said before, what may well happen is that we might get some choppy price action today. It may struggle to get through there. I'm not sure. Maybe it just goes today. Maybe people just quite happy to buy into Jerome Powell's speech, and we just kind of we continue to the upside. But we've got to check everything else that's across the board. This is the S&P. S&P is still stuck in a little bit of a range. It hasn't really made a decision this morning. And then going round, this is the Aussie, the AUX 200, which again is a potential level of resistance up here. The CAC is moving to the upside, but may well still struggle at that particular point. The DAX in Germany looks to me very similar to the FTSE, where we may well have started a lower high here. Depends where that high is. It might sweep this aside, and this might be just part of a larger pattern that holds. So a little bit unclear is the point here. The Hong Kong index is stable. The Japanese index again looks like it's made a fresh low, and it might be making a lower high here. So there's not really a clear picture about direction at this point. And if there is any hint of a picture, it still does point to the downside, even though there's a lack of volatility and there's still some bulls that look to be quite keen out there. This may just present some opportunities to flush out the last few bulls in this particular area and see us move down. I don't know at this stage, and that's the key. Is that when the market doesn't quite react as initially expected and starts to pop up and continue to pop up and pop forward, then clarity is paramount to wait for. And until that clarity comes, then the first trade has to be accepted, and then we're looking to see what's going to happen from here on in. But at this particular stage, it's just unclear. It's really unclear of what's going to happen. I was just checking gold very quickly as well. And what do we have on gold?
Have a look at oil after that too, mate.
Yeah,
we've got OPEC tomorrow as well.
OPEC tomorrow. Yes, we do need to talk about oil. Let's just check. Where's gold gone? Where are you hiding? Okay, let me just double check what I've got here. Is X, isn't it? X. Just scrolling through.
You'll only find a big surge. That's all you'll find.
I mean, here we go. Here's gold. And gold, I think again, kind of like tells us that it's a little bit weaker just right now. But if we look at it on the dailies just surge, as you quite rightly said. So it's really telling us that there is some nervousness out there. You wouldn't be trading gold upside anymore, that's for sure. But people have bought protection. So while they're buying stocks and quite happy to play the market to the upside, they're also buying gold, because you know, the assumption will be if stocks start to tank, then gold will take off, and as long as you've got a decent enough price, then your portfolio is protected. Now let's have a look at oil as well, because as you say, oil has really surged, and we were talking about oil at 55. If it breaks 55, then you've got to be a bull. And I know Ainsley played oil, and she got a slightly better price than 55. I think she paid 54.50 or something, but that's the 55 level. So as soon as it popped up, then oil was as a buying opportunity.
That
And
may stay the case too for a while.
yeah, and this is the interesting thing, isn't it? The OPEC meeting tomorrow. It's an all-day meeting. I don't think that was scheduled before, and I think that's
Okay.
one of the reasons that that oil has surged, because at the time, you know, when oil was weakening, was fairly weak, then there was a concern that that the OPEC group wasn't going to be getting together, and as soon as they announced a date, then it started to change people's feeling about oil, because it meant that that they would start talking about price points again, and maybe starting to curb a little bit of the supply out there. So yeah, oil is a fascinating trade as well, and I wonder, you know, at this stage you're going to need to wait for that OPEC meeting to pass, because there's you know, if there's further upside, you're too late. If there's some downside, then that's probably going to come from an announcement from OPEC, and we might be getting fairly close to a point where that can happen. I'm not too sure. There's probably a level there which is quite a bit higher. There's a level along here which it's just stopped at, and maybe it stops there until tomorrow, and then if it breaks through that point, then we're probably going to that point. So you're a little late if you're looking for upside, but I suppose with a decent meeting from OPEC, then maybe we pop up to the next level. So we'll see what happens with oil tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I'd like to be in it now. With OPEC coming up tomorrow, that would be
Yeah.
a reasonably comfy position to be in, I would have thought.
Oh, absolutely, mate. And you just want to just get your stops in a nice safe place, and you're away, aren't you?
Absolutely. Yep. This could do anything for me. And indeed, if the tensions in Trumpy's little dealings with Iran escalate, that will only just continue to strengthen, one would think.
Yeah, and there's going to be sanctions slapped on Iran today. I don't know what those sanctions are, but I do know that the United Kingdom have effectively talked about backing Donald Trump's spat with Iran. So he's got some friends to draw on, and we will have to see whether that is going to actually escalate or not. At this stage, I suppose we're a little bit news light. You know, there's nothing really happened over the weekend that would suggest, I suppose, some further market weakness, and that's why there's some confidence out there. You know, people are quite happy to continue to buy. Market barometers are still showing for a pretty strong, solid a point in the FTSE 100, up 72% right now of stocks are in positive territory. So doesn't look like it's coming down. We got another 30 minutes to wait, but what's going to take this down? Well, probably not a whole bunch. I don't see too much today, which is suggesting that that we would be weakening. IFO business climate, yeah. So it looks like I think we're looking for a positive day so far, mate. Unless Donald Trump actually comes out and says something significant.
All right, mate. I've got new candles, so I better take a look around. I was going to do this earlier. I don't know what happened. We got off the beaten track there for whatever reason. That's okay. Okay, so what is my bias before I go trading? I suppose is the one thing. Now, Aussie US dollar. I can't see a strong Aussie US dollar for the life of me, but here we are. But we are at a confluence area, or very, very close there too. This is the daily chart I'm looking at. So I've got to be thinking I would rather have seen that tested, that trend line, I must say. But we have tested the monthly pivot, so that gives me reason enough, if you like, to look for a short. There is a resistance level there that we are currently at. If I look at the 4-hour chart, how do we trade this? if we choose to trade it, well, you know, we've got higher highs and higher lows, no question. We've come to a point in the chart that is the resistance level known as the monthly pivot. There is a confluence here, and I would prefer that to have been met. But we have had 1, 2, 3 bull phases in a retracement here, which is currently still a retracement. If you have a look at the bigger picture, and I'm not going too big, but the daily chart is still suggesting to me that we're getting lower highs and lower lows. And why wouldn't you be looking to trade this short at the moment off a resistance level? That would be my first observation. So on that scenario, I've got to be a bear right now. On another scenario, I've got an untested daily pivot below me. I've got a resistance level that I spoke of, and I don't see any reason why it couldn't go short here. What I wouldn't like to see is a flash crash so that we can't trade it. So the 4-hour chart, whilst it's pretty clear to me that we could reverse here, it's not showing me one right now. Potential is there in this bearish engulfing bar if it were to say remain that way, but I've pretty much got a punt on that if I aim to trade short at this point. But if I go to the 30-minute chart, a couple of things. Clear double top on the 30-minute chart. Clear potential false break. I'll say clear potential, if there's such a thing, false break. All I'd need to see here is a retest of the monthly pivot and a lower high, and I could just trade that, and away we'd go. That's probably going to be my first point of attack because I don't have a trade line available to me in this vicinity. So if I were to see that, a retest of the monthly pivot and a reversal bar, I would look to trade this down to the daily pivot. So there you go. That's my first of the majors. Now cable has done very, very similar things, and we spoke about this earlier, of course. We've broken a, let's call it an intermediate trend line, because we've got a daily chart here, or trade line. It's not a trend line. But we haven't reached the monthly pivot, which is a little bit disappointing, because obviously that's a better place than in the middle of nowhere to look for a short. Am I looking for a short is the question. And I really can't answer that right now, because all I have is a broken resistance area, yet a strong resistance area above us. It's also a horizontal level, that monthly pivot, as you can see from here, provided support to the market, has provided resistance to the market as well in the not too distant past. So yes, we're at a resistance level right now, a recent resistance level. I wouldn't call it the strongest level on the chart, but there you go. What else have I got? Just in the middle of nowhere, really. I need to see one of two things. First thing I'd like to see is tomorrow either a retest of, a test of the daily pivot, or on a smaller time frame, consolidation above this area, this trade line, then price come back underneath it on a smaller time frame and retest it. That would give me a consideration to go short. To go long, gee, I'd need something significant here to show me to go long, because I've got an absolute strong level of resistance dead ahead, the one that we just discussed. So I can't see me going long here in any way, shape or form until the monthly pivot is broken and maybe retested. No, I can't see a long here at all. So I'll be looking for perhaps a false break of this area here. Smaller time frames today, is that going to be possible? Well, it's certainly possible. This is the 4-hour chart. We're already broken. We've already consolidated. If we were to get back below here, and in particular, if we retested both the daily pivot and that broken trend line, yes, I can definitely see. If I got a small enough candle here to trade at the weekly pivot to take first lot of profit, I think I'd take more than the norm off here. I'd take at least 50% off at this level, provided I've got a good reward to risk available to me. The potential for, and I suppose if you really use your imagination and call that a left shoulder and that a right shoulder, and therefore that the neckline that's been broken is about to be retested, that looks interesting. But again, there's no way I could enter long here. I could probably risk it entering off the daily pivot because there's plenty of room to take profit before the monthly, or maybe even back to the weekly, then look to trade it long. I'm just not that keen, but I do note that potentially this is a broken and retested neckline. So maybe just maybe I'll have a look at that later as well. That's on the 4-hour chart. But I'd really like to see the daily pivot tested. I must confess, because I don't like to trade away from an untested daily pivot. It don't prove very fruitful for me. So the euro, we've spoken about this at length as well, and this certainly does look to be on a bull run at this point. And as the what's this line here? No idea. It's like a fib level. Oh, it's a trend line. Okay, so the break and retest of this line here, which is just ridiculous. That's appeared out of nowhere. It must be on a bigger time frame. Yeah, there it is. So we've broken through that weekly chart or that weekly resistance area. And as I said before, the target appears to be up here, but I can't just jump in. You've got to wait for that big retracement or a retracement of some kind. And on the 4-hour chart, that's what I'll be looking to trade. As I said before, perhaps there is a trade available for us to go short and trade the retracements. And I think that's probably going to be the only opportunity I'm going to have on the smaller time frames in the next day or so. There's no way I can just jump in long here. So retracement required. Whether I can trade or not is going to rely on a couple of things. One being a potential reversal pattern. So a double top. Difficult to project the head and shoulders on this chart unless you call that a left shoulder. Then time's going to have to pass. So I don't really see that as being an option. Maybe a shooting star, something like that, would get me interested. I'd like to see price come to the daily pivot, find its way back to a resistance level. I don't know on this chart where that's going to occur, because that appears to be the only one which is very near the daily pivot. So bounce here, find the shoulder there, go, maybe. It's an idea. It's not necessarily the one that I'm looking for. So yeah, it's going to be tough. The euro is going to be tough to trade in the next 24 hours or so. This is the one I'm really interested in, have been for ages, looking to trade this long, very, very keen to do that. But I've been in it as well, but I just can't find clear space here. It doesn't want to get above the monthly pivot. It doesn't seem to want to get below the weekly pivot, and we've gone into a, well, I won't say protracted, but it's now getting what week old like consolidation period between the monthly and the weekly pivot. Maybe that's the way I need to look at this, and confine it to a range on a smaller time frame. Let's do that if we can, but it's not that obvious. I suppose you can put it in, but it really isn't that obvious. What I like to see is equal highs and lows, and I don't really have equal highs and lows here. But the range looks obvious. And if the range looks obvious, maybe you've just got to put it in. Maybe that's my range there. So I'll be looking to play this one. This is pound Aussie as a long. That's my bias. But if we get to here and look like reversing, then I'll trade it from there, of course. If it gets to here and gives me a false break again, then I'll look to trade it to the bottom. But my ultimate direction bias here is definitely long. And if I can find a way into that again, then that's exactly what I will do. So I'm really keen on this one, pound Aussie, and have been for a couple of weeks. That line there might be a very, very good indicator as well. Break here, consolidate back above, retest, then look to trade it long. That would be my focus for the day. Mate, I don't think I'll go too much further. I have a few ideas. We've spoken about euro pound, Kiwi CAD. I'm now out of that short trade. I'm not sure I should be, to be fair. I know we've got a Kiwi rate statement. I think it's tomorrow. In fact, might be early tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I did see that. Let's just double check that.
What are they tipping? Are they forecasting a cut? I know that that's been talked about widely, but I'm not sure they would be.
Where is that? So up next. Oh no, it's trade balance tonight. My time. I don't see anything tomorrow. Ah, yeah,
Pretty sure it's this
Wednesday.
week.
Is
Wednesday.
it? Yeah, Wednesday. Wednesday they are talking about a hold.
A hold, right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Be interested to hear PB and Julian's take on that tonight in the free show, because they're on top of that, and I think they were widely expecting that the RBNZ would strongly consider the next rate cut. So it'll be interesting to see what's happening on the ground there. From my side, this is starting to look like a potential reversal, but it's a long way from that. To be fair, I mean we're still in a downtrend. We're at a resistance area, so I wouldn't be looking to trade this long anytime soon. It would need to do something pretty special to get me that way. We've got an untested daily pivot. So to play this one today, if I were to get back into this, I would look for a break here and consolidate back below retest, especially if it came back and closed below the weekly pivot, then retested that trend line. I think that's a great place to get short. If you did do that, be sure to take profit before the daily pivot, because that will have the potential to cast it in the other direction, given that you have, what do you call this pattern, mate? Is that a rising star for you or something?
A morning star. Yeah,
Morning star, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And it's a pretty good
So
one, isn't
you,
it?
yeah, it is a good one. And there it sits. So if we were to come to the daily pivot, the potential for this to put in a higher low is quite strong. So that's my counsel. Don't trade through the daily pivot without taking precautions. You've got to get something off the table here, and make sure you can't lose on the trade. So that's where I'll be looking. Short, but get some money in the bank before you hit the daily pivot. Now, if this is to give you a reversal bar on the daily pivot, then I don't know that I'd close the position, providing I was safe, but I would certainly add it along at that point, trading that bar that did exactly that, because that is, as I say, that's certainly got potential to reverse here. So yeah, I don't think I'll go too much further, mate. I think I've probably covered the majors as I like to do on a Monday. It gives me a perspective of what's going on. But I wanted to look at Kiwi CAD because I've been in that trade. Wanted to look at Pound Aussie because I'm dying to get back into that trade. And Euro Pound fascinates me. So yeah, that's where I'm at, buddy.
Okay, well let me just give you an idea of the FTSE right now. A couple of lines to kind of to look at. There's a few things down here with the RSI, which is just a little bit tricky to ascertain right now. We've got to be thinking long at this particular stage as this comes back. It's a really interesting 15 minutes coming up, and what I'm going to wait for is a 5-minute signal. We've got 15 minutes before this particular bar closes. If it closes under this daily pivot or around the daily pivot, then I will be quite happy just to wait and allow the picture to continue to unravel. But right now, the 15-minute bar that we've just had it's a bit of a failed evening star. Now we're just talking about the morning star, and the evening star would need this particular bar to have cut a lot further into the range of the first bar. So the fact that it's only cut in maybe a third of the first bar is still quite a bullish signal. So it's there's I suppose a bit of a pickup in volatility here with the way that it's flown forward, and then we get this bar. This is an engulfing bar. I suppose that's the one thing about it. So we need just a little bit more time with this to see what we're going to do. But we can't really trust the 15-minute. We're going to have to trust the 5. So let's have a look at the 5 and see what it's doing. At the minute, it's just it's trying to put in some upside. So if I get a bit of clarity from the 5, I will add the protection and go long. But I'm going to wait for these 5-minute bars just to kind of come into play. What I really want is just a little bit lower, and then see how the market reacts around about the daily pivot, because there's a suggestion right now that that the long is the the best course of action. We've got to really start to switch to the hourly after we see what's going to go on with the 5-minute bars, because if the 5-minute bar gives us a reversal bar on, let's say, the next two, with one of the next two, that would suggest that towards the end of the hour that we push back to the upside. But if it doesn't, then it would suggest that maybe the first hour isn't really going to give us too much of a hint of the best direction to go in, and we just get something with a really long tail, which doesn't really tell us too much about the confidence of the market. I will just bring you back to the barometer here, and this is what's going on under the hood right now. We got markets which is 69%. So we have had a little bit of weakness actually at the high, but 69%. So we got up to 72% of stocks in positive territory, 69% currently. So I'm keeping my eye on that and seeing if that changes significantly enough. I think if it does, then we might be better just letting it pass right now. But so far we're still looking for upside, and it's just trying to get a little bit of clarity. It is a bit of an issue here. Now this is the thing, you see, we could get a bar on the 5, which suggests that we should be looking for upside in this area now, but that isn't a great area from what I can tell to take the long. I'd much prefer it here or here, because even though I am looking for some signal, because what could happen here is that we freeze here, we get a 5-minute bar which suggests upside, and then we pop up to the weekly pivot without testing this area again. But it's just the confluence that I'm now looking for. Let's just pull a fib on it as well. I'm going to pull a fib from the bottom. Yeah, even the fib suggests that that there's a little bit lower in tow here before we should be taking this. I'm not that keen on jumping in at this stage. I suppose if you were to take it from that point, then you got, I'd say, a 50% retracement of the move this morning so far. But I think we're going to have to take from the low to the current point and see that we got probably another 6 pips to the downside before we really should be looking for any signs and signals. So there might be signs and signals here, but it's not the ideal point. So I'm going to pass on the first 5-minute bar and just see if it gives me a clearer signal in a better area. And actually, this is better because it's continuing to pop down just a little bit further. So we need to get a little bit lower before we're looking for upside. But at this particular time, we're going to have to consider upside on a short run rather than downside at this particular time. But what we're looking for is the next 10 minutes just to give us that clear indication of what we should be doing. And if there's no clear indication, we're going to do nothing. But it's this next 5-minute bar that I'm going to look for. So this one I'm going to let pass, and I'm going to just wait for one more. This does suggest that we've got a hold here. I haven't got enough reasons for this area to be a hold, so I'm going to wait. But it's the next one which is going to be key for me. So I'm going to look for another bar to suggest reversal, and if I get it, I'm going to go long. If I don't get it, then I can wait, because it's just going to be too difficult to make an assumption one way or the other. Now I may well be wrong here. That this might be short enough. I mean, I'll have a quick look around and see if there's anything here that would suggest that this is the best area. Let's get rid of some of these lines. Let's see. So we're currently here. No, I'm not willing to make that case. I think that's, and I'm not willing to make that case either. I still think. Yeah, I think this is the area. So we're looking at another four pips or so below, because we've got an area of support there. We got the daily pivot there, and we have got the fib there as well. So we're not necessarily looking to go long here. We're just looking for it to touch this area and then give us a reversal signal on the 5-minute chart. This is just a little bit too high, in my opinion, even though we've got we've got barometers saying that regardless of anything, we should be looking for the short. Let's just see if this is changing significantly. 57% now in positive territory. Actually, not now, but 57% from the highs. So there is just a little bit of nervousness after the initial surge. That's enough to keep me out, mate. That's enough to keep me on the sidelines, you know, until I see what I really need to see, which is the lower price and then a turnaround. And as I say, I may well be wrong. It might be that the market's keen enough to pop up here at this particular point, but I can't justify it myself.
Yeah, fair enough. And again, I'm in the same boat. I can't do what I can't do. It's a matter of waiting until the signals are there, and currently they're not. I know exactly what I want to do, but it's just waiting for those opportunities, and I'm sure they'll come. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but they'll come.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we're basically we're on hold a little bit. I don't know if anybody else has got any other ideas that they want us to have a quick look at before we shut down. We're in again in about an hour, less than an hour actually now, isn't it?
No, 2 hours.
2 hours, more than
Yep.
2 hours. So
11 o'clock your time, I think.
11 o'clock my time. Oh, okay,
Oh, so
yeah.
not
Oh,
11.
yeah. Of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah, 11 o'clock. Yeah.
Of course it is. So we've got a little while to wait before we're in again. But yeah, if anybody's got any other ideas of anything they're looking at, or you've got any questions about what Jeff and I have been talking about so far, then feel free to ask them, because we've got nothing else on our end and we're quite happy. Bitcoin, of course. Bitcoin. So, I mean, how you play this now, you know, is slightly beyond me. But I mean, this is really for you, mate. I wanted to just to show you how crazy this has
Yeah,
been.
it's crazy.
We are
Look,
now up.
I'm just a complete spectator on Bitcoin. I've got
Yeah.
absolutely no intention of trading it ever. So I just want to
Well,
look and see what it does.
this is the last 3 months. So we went up and then we exploded to the upside. We're
Yep.
exploding again to the upside. We're touching almost touching 11,000 on Bitcoin. So it appears that there is a complete full confidence in Bitcoin. Now, if we think about what's going on out there, I thought some of the drivers would be negative for Bitcoin, but it seems to me that there's enough news out there now and enough announcements that are suggesting that the cryptocurrency craze is back on. You know, we've got Facebook coming out with, is it called Libra? I think it's called. They've got their own cryptocurrency. We got XRP doing a deal with Money Grab, is it called? So they've got their cryptocurrency starting to make some headway as well. And we had Western Union. What's that, mate?
Which makes me wonder what the hell Bitcoin is rallying for.
Well, this is what
Are the
this was.
investors saying Bitcoin's going to be the best and it will be the one? Because if all these other dudes are making their own cryptos, yeah, what the heck?
Oh, yeah, I completely wonder the same thing. But however, maybe it is one of those things that that gives us the suggestion that that Bitcoin is the daddy of the crypto. So there will be wider use. You know, if you're not on Facebook, then you're not going to be using Libra. So so if there is a push towards cryptocurrencies, then I guess Bitcoin is probably your go-to. Because you know there is a way that you can do transactions with it. XRP seems to be something that that is also interesting as well, because XRP is more about bank to bank, as far as I'm aware. So if we look at Bitcoin, I think we have to look at Bitcoin really as a barometer for the cryptocurrency market, and then start to look at potential opportunities in things like Ethereum. Hasn't really had the same moves. It's started to pick up. It hasn't had the same explosive move to the upside as Bitcoin. We look at XRP, same sort of thing. And XRP, as I say, this one interests me the most. I really like the XRP story, because XRP was tested by Western Union But Western Union said that their own technology was, I think, equally as good. So it just wasn't worth doing the deal. The deal wouldn't have been all that lucrative for them. But as far as I'm aware, that was in XRP's beta phase. So I think XRP has now superseded what they were showing them initially, and now they've gone and done a partnership with I think it's called MoneyGram or MoneyGrab. I'm not sure, but they've done a part. They've got a partnership with somebody else, which again is has got a huge likelihood of increasing the interest and the use of something like XRP. And if we're looking at Bitcoin as a potential barometer for the cryptocurrency market, then something like XRP, in my opinion, would be a half decent choice. Let's just have a quick look at this trend line along here, because that looks to be something that we could use as a potential break point. Let me just take that off a second. There's the high, and it brings us there. Yeah, well, maybe not the best one actually, because it had broken through without giving us any upside. But
it's a massive descending triangle there that's broken now.
Yeah, yes, there is. Nicely spotted. Yeah, so we got this. This is what Jeff's talking about here. Looks like it may well at this stage being a little bit false. So we'll have to see whether XRP can pop itself forward.
There's even a bigger one, Ash. Even a bigger one. If you go to that spike in
this one here.
Spike, yeah, come down.
Yeah, there is, isn't there?
That's been hammered.
Just quickly do a measured move on that. Not quite yet. Hasn't quite got there yet. So it depends on where this line is. Actually, it might be just a little bit lower. It might be there, which might actually wouldn't change the the base of the top. So yeah, so that looks like it's got a little bit to run as well. So that would be my particular favorite. You know, I think Bitcoin you're a bit too late on, but yeah, we were talking about the 3K, weren't we? Facebook is linked to the dollar, so not really crypto. Okay, interesting. And it's not decentralized. Okay, I mean, Christo, you know a lot more about this stuff than me. I don't know. Were you in Bitcoin? Did you manage to get that at 3,000? I mean, that has been a crazy run, isn't it?
192% this year. That's
unbelievable. Unbelievable. And you know, most of that run has been in the last 3 months. You know. Okay, just quickly going to wrap up on the FTSE 100, because we are now in the final 30 seconds of these of the move here, and this is what we have. Barometer is still pointing a little bit weaker. So this is what we have. Now let's just quickly check the 5-minute chart to start with. 5-minute chart has broken down a little bit further, not suggesting that that the timing is quite correct to be looking for further upside in the FTSE at this particular stage. You see that the last 5 seconds, if it manages to pop up and hold its level, we do have. Okay, so that's it for the FTSE 100 in. The first hour has now passed, and it's bouncing off the pivot, but we don't really have a reversal. The hourly bar is not tradable. You know, who's going to want to trade that? I think Jeff may look at this and be looking at the upper end of that. Would you, Jeff?
Yeah, I would. If it wasn't bang on the weekly pivot, I think that would be interesting. But
I mean, with something like this, if you're looking for stops, would you be more interested if it first of all broken the low side and then rushed up?
Would I be interested in what? Still trading that candle?
No, the way I see this, the way that I see the kind of the potential hunt for stops is that when people enter here, they have stops up here, but until then they wouldn't have their stops in place. So does it then stand to reason that we'd be looking for a break of this level and then be putting in the hunt for stops?
Yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from. Look, that's a massive congregation of stops right there. There's no question in my mind, you know, because the trend is continuing. well, let's call intermediate trend, where the trend is continuing there if you're a bear, right?
Yes.
Because you're getting lower lows, lower highs,
Yes.
and that's still intact. So exactly where you just said is where the stops are going to be. It's going to be probably 5 pips, maybe 10 pips above the weekly pivot.
Yeah.
So other people might have them above that bar before the weekly pivot. Who knows? But there's absolute liquidity there, no question.
Yeah.
So and then there's another liquidity level at the next lot of highs. As soon as and then there's another one, at that high on your left. So that could rally to maybe up to your DR2 or somewhere in that vicinity, and
Yeah.
then crash.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, I
Interesting.
see your point. I see your
Yeah,
point.
so really because we have a downtrend, that's why this bar is interesting. So if this was just a kind of well, let's say it was a double top. With a double top, you'd want to see them triggered in first, and then put your then the order becomes interesting.
Yes, if you look at it that way, that does become an interesting way to look at it. The way I would look at it is preempt that, providing I've got reason to do so.
Hmm.
And the reasons are there because I've got a trend line that's going through almost through that high. It's not exact, but if you draw the trend line from your extreme high, no, from your high up the
Sorry,
other way.
man. I wanted to put that in because of
You're right.
yeah,
It's so close, it's not funny,
yeah, yeah,
So that is an entry for me. But the weekly pivot would spook the heck out of me
yeah,
because if I'm wrong, well, I wouldn't be wrong with the liquidity, but if there's no one there to drive it through the liquidity, which is the second part of that equation, the stop hunters, if you like.
yeah,
If they're not there, and if they're not there at this moment, then I'm going to fall flat in my face,
yeah.
and that becomes the difficult part.
Well, there is now a bit of an entry to the downside again. You at this stage you're not looking long. You can't look long anymore. These smaller term time frames are suggesting that there could be some still movements to the upside. But when we look at this on a 4-hour chart, the interesting thing for me on the 4-hour chart is number one, we close just around about the daily pivot. Number two, we close just below what would be support. That fascinates me. But the interesting key here is the RSI. RSI trended to the downside. It's trending up, and then it's come right through. And as it's come back up again, it has not been able to break through some highs here. So I've now got this little trend line. It's a 4-hour chart, so it becomes a lot more significant than the 5 and the 15 and the hourly. I've got a little trend line there, and I've got a little trend line there. The second one's maybe a little bit more questionable, but I've got a potential break and a turnaround here. So watch out for the next few bars here, because on the hourly and the 15, because this is still suggesting that there's some downside here. That's what I look for. So we're waiting for information, but the information right now is certainly for some further downside. That's the way that I'm now reading this. There's no short-term triggers for downside, and just like the euro pound, we would have to wait for those short-term triggers to come into play. Otherwise, we could be entering into a market which is going to be a little bit sloppy for a little while, and it might be that we're waiting right up until the US Open before we get some genuine downside. Remember, we've got 4 hours to wait. It's currently 9 o'clock AM over here. Next 4-hour bar is going to close at 1 p.m. The US market opens at 2:30. So I think we wait for a little bit more clarity, and then we see whether the US market, if this hasn't gone anywhere, actually gives us some further downside. But that's now the way that I'm looking at this. I'm looking at a potential trade at 2:30 to short this market rather than doing anything else. Not going to go long. Not going to play anything else. Just going to wait and see if the short-term trend in the 15, I suppose, most significantly, does actually give us a lower low, and break through some levels. And if it does, then I think the short is well and truly back on again.
All right, mate. Happy days. And I'm looking to trade retracements on the majors against the dollar, but only to significant support levels. if I get the opportunity. But ironically, I need retracements on the potential retracements before I can trade. That's totally confusing. If you're listening to me, I understand that. But I guess bottom line is I'm not ready to trade right now.
Yeah. Christo, just an observer with a fear of missing out. I know, aren't we all, buddy? Aren't we all? And it looks like we've missed the Bitcoin. I mean, you know, when I see Bitcoin, I'm like Jeff. You know, it's just not my game, Bitcoin. But when I see moves in any market, same with gold actually, that kind of tears up like it does, and like it has with something like Bitcoin, and I see how easy that money must have been to see roll into your bank account, or it seems easy anyway. But you know, after the event, then that fear of missing out turns into a sickening of missing out, and I think that's the case, isn't it? With Bitcoin, it's just gone. It probably will go another double than where it is, but you know, I still think that there's a possibility with some of those other cryptocurrencies. So let's look out for those.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, and from an observer's point of view, similar. Well, I haven't got any fear of missing out on Bitcoin at all. But what I do have is an appreciation that, and I'd really like to know who drives this market. I'd really like to know who's actually got their money on the table with this, because what they tend to do, if they are really big players, they're going to pick up a lot of, let's call them retail traders along
Yes.
the way. People who are just, you know, here, shit, Bitcoin's on the rise. Let's get in. Let's get in.
Yeah.
Because it's been to, what did it go to, 26,000 or whatever it was.
Something near that. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll think that that's going there again, or even higher,
Yeah.
as you know, the stock market has done time and time again.
That's right.
It don't work that way,
Yeah.
and you know, you're setting yourself up for a loss if you're jumping into the market right now on Bitcoin, in my humble opinion. And that
Oh
is
yeah,
only
yeah,
my,
yeah. You'd have had to get in at 3,000.
absolutely, you
You
know,
know,
or
hold your
somewhere
breath.
way below now.
All right, mate. Well,
So yeah,
let's
not for
wrap
me.
it up, and we'll be back in a couple of hours anyway with the boys and Ainsley, and we will see how these markets shape up. So I'm looking short still for 200. You're looking for a few bounces.
Yep, absolutely. See you then.
Great stuff. All right, thanks for all your information, Christo. Actually, I probably learn more from you than I do from the news when it comes down to cryptocurrencies. So there's not enough news out there, I don't think. Well, nothing I can trust. We'll be back same trade time, same trade channel tomorrow. See you then, guys.
Uru.